This week in Technology as Intervention, we're going to be discussing metacognition. The objective is to understand how online teaching strategies and assistive technology really support students' learning and engagement. This is from an article by Smith and Okolo. All of this research is based in this article, and it pretty much tells us that while evidence of the effectiveness of some tools of technology, such as Scholastic Read, is available, for the majority of technology-based solutions, there's no actual data to show that they are valid and reliable. The reason behind this, well, experts are really saying it's a combination. One being innovation, technology is in constant change, and in order to get the data that the technology would need to stay the same over time. The next being the limited availability of a control that's willing to stay with that same technology for that period of time. A lack of research. Some reasons for the lack of research are it's very costly to do that research over time, and other reasons are that we know technology works with students. We can see it immediately when they're engaged, so there's not a lot of people who would like to put in that money for the research to prove that. And then the newness of educational technology, it's ever changing, and so the research would continue to have to change as well. And there's some limitations in research methodology and related components when we talk about technology. So the use of technology applications for students with disabilities, again, with response to intervention or the MTSS, multi-tiered system of supports, we always say within that we want to use effective tools. So can technology really be considered an effective tool that we can use? Well, Smith and Okolo are telling us that one way to further technology use is to examine what we know about effective instructional practices and link those practices with technology-based solutions. So that's what we're going to be doing a little bit here in the next 2 weeks, is we're going to be talking about what we do know from data that is valid, reliable, and graphed over time on technology based on the practices that are in these pieces of technology, as opposed to the technology itself, which doesn't have that valid, reliable data over long periods of time to prove its effectiveness. So where do we begin? Well, the most important lesson you could ever teach your students is how they learn. Research shows that when metacognitive skills are taught to students, learning always improves. It is one of the few interventions that we have the effectiveness as always improving. Metacognitive skills are teachable through appropriate interventions, so we're going to be discussing a few of those. First, we have to really understand what metacognition is. So metacognition, John H. Flavel in 1976 stated metacognition is one's knowledge concerning one's own cognitive processes and products or anything related to them. So it requires, first, your knowledge of your prior knowledge. Again, you're looking at the student's background knowledge, what they already possess. You can use KWL charts to help with that. The second is continuous monitoring. Students have the ability to monitor their own learning or their lack of learning. So that is modeled through ongoing questioning. The third is experience. Students have an understanding of what kinds of experience or modality really helps them to understand. In order to do this, students must know Bloom's taxonomy and learning modalities. We should really have these posted somewhere as an example or available to them so that when they are looking at how they're going to present data, they can really look at, well, how do I learn best? Should I present it in a report, a lesson, a movie, an artwork? What is going to be the way that's best for me? And then the fourth piece is regulation. Students know the goals of the lessons and they're able to regulate their own learning to really understand, am I retaining the knowledge that I'm being asked to learn through this lesson? So they need to be asking questions like, does this make sense? Do I know the goal? What don't I understand? What do I understand? We also have to make sure that I don't know is no longer an option for students. Excuse me. So when they ask you things, instead of saying, allowing, I don't know, you reply back, well, tell me what you do know. So I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing on this paper. Well, tell me what you do know. Do you know that you are supposed to start with addition before you move to the subtraction piece? Do you know? Find out what they do know. So let's start with number one, knowledge of one's prior knowledge. This is the piece that really helps us to know what we know and what we don't know. So we have to make sure students understand what background knowledge they already possess and how we can tie that in. So connecting new information to former information is really good. I love this little clip I'm going to show you real quick. It really helps to understand why background knowledge is so important.
We have who's on first, what's on second. I don't know who's on third. That's what I want to find out. I want you to tell me the names of the fellas on the St. Louis team. I'm telling you, who's on first, what's on second. I don't know who's on third. Do you know the fellas' names? Yes. Well, then who's playing first? Yes. I mean the fellow's name on first base. Who? The fellow playing first base for St. Louis. Who? The guy on first base. Who is on first? All I'm trying to find out is what's the guy's name on first base. Oh, no. What is on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. He's on third. We're not talking about him. How did I get on third base? You mentioned his name. What is the fella's name on third base? What is the fella's name on second base? I'm not asking you who's on second. Who's on first? I don't know. Third base.
So how to apply step 1? Really, we need to motivate students. We need to make sure that we're teaching them and making sure that we tell them what we're teaching them, how often they're going to use this skill, and why it's so very important. We have to explain what is to be learned, recall their previous knowledge, and have students ask questions about what they want to learn. I love this comic. Attention, this is a test. This is a test of the nation's education system. If this were a real emergency, we'd find a better solution than more and more tests. We really do need to look at, for metacognition purposes, what is the best way to assess each student. Testing is not always an accurate measure of a student's knowledge. So continuous monitoring, thinking about what they're thinking. So I'm going to just show you a quick clip here. I'm going to try and move this up so that it'll let us start at the beginning. I'm actually going to give you this clip. I'm going to post it onto YouTube so that you can watch it there, because it's really quiet when I'm trying to play it in this clip, and I want you to be able to hear what she's saying. It's only a 12-minute clip. I only need you to watch about the first 8 minutes of it, so I was going to cut it short in here, but we'll just go ahead and move on from the current slide. So again, ways that we can use technology, but also use these practices. Rubistar is a great one. Developing rubrics for everything that our kiddos do. Rubistar is real easy. It has a lot of rubrics already developed for you. Just a great website to go to. I'm going to stick this movie clip that I was going to show you about how to really engage in think alouds with students. I'm going to put it at the very end so that you can watch it in your own time, and you can turn up the volume a little bit louder. So that'll be the last video clip. But if you want to get to it, you'll go to the www.youtube.com/watch, capital Q, lowercase OL, capital A, lowercase b, capital G, little g. And I'll post that at the end of ours as well. So how to apply step 2. We really have to make sure the information's clear and it's presented in a variety of ways. Again, that universal design for learning and those choice boards and learning modalities, those sites that we've been on thus far, they would all fall under this step 2. We have to tell students how the goal is going to be accomplished and think aloud as we're doing it. This video clip will show you exactly what I mean when I'm talking about a think aloud, but most of you as teachers know what a think aloud is. It's really helping them to see the process your brain's making and how you're making connections so that then they can make those same connections. The method for evaluation, a lot of the rubrics we just talked about, the KWL, graphic organizers, GIST is a great place to find some graphic organizers. That was the website that we learned last week. Venn diagrams, concept maps, even mnemonics or visual strategies we sometimes tend to forget. Those comics, those videos, all of those are great ways to apply that step 2. So we can incorporate technology in that way as well. I liked this. This is a little food for thought based on spell checker. We do have a lot of forms of technology like spell checker that we can use ineffectively. So just because we give a child an assistive technology device doesn't mean that they know how to use it appropriately and when to use it to really make their learning the best possible learning. If you didn't have time to read this whole thing, it's in the PowerPoint presentation slides for you to look at again. So now we're on to number 3, the experience. Students really have to have an understanding of what kind of experience or learning modality helps them to make connections with knowledge. So So we do have to explicitly teach both Bloom's taxonomy, Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, all those learning modalities. We should have them in the classroom somewhere. We should let teachers and students work together to come up with ideas of ways they learn best. I learn better when you show me, when you let me work with my materials, when you tell me. I learn better when I'm applying my learning, when I can write a report, present a lesson, make a movie. Providing a lot of choice options, kind of what I'm trying to do with this course, in that at first we started out with a PowerPoint. Some students said they didn't feel like they learned best because the voiceover is hard in PowerPoint, so we turned it into a movie. First we tried not doing any voice because it was distracting for some students, and then people liked the voice, so we brought it back in. So it is a little bit of a play on figuring out what works best for your students, because every class you have is going to need different things, just like our class does. So how to apply step 3? First, get students actively involved. Really use the content to create a product that works for them. Collaborate, refer back to student questions from step 1. And then I love the acronym IDEAL. What that acronym stands for is identify, define, explore, act, and learn. This is what I use with my kids. I identify what am I trying to learn. I define exactly what I'm trying to learn. I explore using my favorite modality. I act on that exploration and get really involved actively, and I've learned. So I like that as ideal. We put a picture with each of those up on our board so that kids can really see what does that look like. This would also be, for example, your fair use matrix that's coming up. You can collaborate with each other on that fair use matrix to do portions with one another. You can make that matrix look however works best for your students. It can be an Excel sheet, it can be a Microsoft Word, it can be a Venn diagram, it can be a graph. However you feel like your students would best learn what's appropriate for them to post on the internet, what's appropriate for them to do when they're online, what's not appropriate, and what are the consequences of that. And why do they need to know this? Just like before you read the book, some of you didn't know why it was so important for us to know copyright laws. It's important because we are these children's educators, and if we don't teach them, who will? So let's move on to step 4, which is regulations. Students must really know the goal of the lesson so that they can be able to regulate their own growth. Really, you want them to be able to regulate both the growth of their learning and the retention of that knowledge. So to do this, students need to be able to plan, monitor, and evaluate their thinking. I don't know if you can catch the top of this, but what it says at the very top is educators must teach adequate verbal responses to students for use in discussion. This is one that I really like. You can, for certain age levels, depending on what age you have, you could print this out on a note card and have students, every time that you have a discussion, have this with them. And if they agree with the person, they could say something similar to, my idea is similar to Charles. I think that we should blah, blah, blah. Or my ideas expand on Teresa's. I think, or I agree with Margaret and want to add something to what she said. Also teaching them it's okay to disagree, but to do that in such a way that you really are stating your version as well as explaining why their perspective may be fine, but you also have a different thought or belief. And then clarifying. Will you please explain why you feel this way? When a student asks, students should be able to clarify with other students, not just you. So that's a good thing to teach them. And then paraphrasing. Helping students to see that they can ask other students by saying, I think you're saying this, or I believe you are saying this. It's really good for kids to have these. This over here I'm just going to run through real quick. This is just a great way to pick kids. We don't have a lot of time, so really Teachers Pick, Stick Pick, or Pick Me are great iPad and iPhone apps that randomly pick students. So is Class Dojo. So if you put any of those on your website or your iPad app, you'll easily be able to pick a child for discussion. It's always best to state the question to the whole class and then let the Pick Me device pick and let that student respond, because you want every student to be thinking that they might have to answer this question so that they stay engaged. You also want every student to know that they'll have to respond to other people.